So this is Kate.
Okay.
Comes recommended by Leroy. And we said we'd have a chat today about, you were involved with the Roadhouse, weren't you?
I was involved with the Roadhouse. The Roadhouse and I had the longest relationship I've had with anything apart from my parents.
Yeah.
So I worked at the Roadhouse as a student when I was doing my degree at Salford. And that came about because I became friends with the original owner of the club, who was John Macbeath, a wonderful, characterful, larger-than-life geezer who'd been a publican all of his life, really. He had the castle on Oldham Street.
Oh, right, yeah.
Him and his wife, Jean, had the castle. And before I was a bartender at the Roadhouse, I was a bartender at PJ Bell's across the road from the castle. And we would often, with Phil and Jackie, go into the castle for pre-shift drinks at the weekend. And John and Jean would often come to the PJ Bell's after the pub had shut for post-shift drinks. So that's how I met John. I can only imagine that PJ Bell's was thriving at the time, packed with a schedule of live music, soul and funk and jazz and blues. And I think John, that probably gave John the inspiration to find a space for himself to do his own version of that. And then we found the basement on Newton Street, called it the Roadhouse, and started it up in 1993.
Was that when it started?
Yeah.
Wow, I thought it was much later for some reason.
Yeah.
And PJ Bell's, I used to love it in there. Was that going for long before it became Matt and Fred's, didn't it?
Very good question. I don't know when PJ Bell's became PJ Bell's. I can't really remember when it stopped being PJ Bell's and became Collider. And then after Collider, it became Matt and Fred's with Matt Nixon. And Fred, whose surname I can't quite recall. So no, I don't know when Bell's opened. Phil Bell will be an interesting interviewee.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So John opened his own version, a much more low-down, dirty, rustic dive bar version of PJ Bell's, and programmed blues bands for the first 6 months. I remember him showing it off to me, and the security staff at the time wore leather trousers. They had long beards. There were Harley Davidsons parked outside. It was incredible. All the bar pumps were proper real ale, and the clientele were an interesting mixed bunch. But blues couldn't sustain it, and he had to think of other genres of music to get people in. At which point, I think Rick Michael stepped in to help with the programming, and somehow or other the four ended up doing a residency there.
Yeah.
And that kind of just opened up the club to loads of other different music fans and bands.
When you say residency, did you like play over several nights or several weeks?
Several nights.
Did they?
It's like a long fall weekend. I can't remember if it was 93 or 94. I only started working there in 1994.
Yeah.
So, I can't claim to have been there from the beginning, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But then in 1998, John had basically just lost interest. You know, it built this thing up from the ground, and it was a great club. And by this time, I don't think it really had a particular, people will remember the club for a whole host of different musical types. I think we were branded, it appeared from the outside to be largely indie rock, but there was an awful lot of indie bands coming out of Manchester at that time, following in the footsteps of Oasis.
Yeah.
But there was no real booking policy. If we thought people would come and watch the act, then the act got booked.
Yeah.
So So the Roadhouse was, at this point, it wasn't... No, I've lost my thread now.
Was it as big as the Band on the Wall, say, for...
Originally, yeah. I mean, Band on the Wall is now much bigger, but
Yeah.
our legitimate capacity was 200, which was often breached.
Yeah, was it? I remember seeing a mate's band, Andy Burns, I've forgotten his brother's name, but their band played, and they were the next big thing at the time. They never made it, but I remember the Roadhouse being packed, and I always thought of it as like a, you know, decent local bands would play and it'd fill up.
That was the idea. That's what we hoped
Yeah.
to achieve. But then also, you know, we would probably... We were known as the Toilet Tour, which was the venue that bands travel through on their first tour.
Yeah.
Once they've got their first record deal.
Yeah.
Generally, promoters would put those bands on, and that's where we got the Coldplays and.
Did Coldplay play there?
Yeah,
Did
several times. Muse, Stereophonics. Pretty much. I mean, the list is endless. I could dig it out for us. But over a 10 or 15 year period, pretty much every band at the beginning of their career came through us, and if they didn't come through us, they'd come through the Roadhouse, the Boardwalk.
Yeah.
Or Night and Day.
Yeah. You forget, don't you, bands played at the Boardwalk, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing the Primitives play there.
Yeah, I mean, that was an amazing space. Shame it didn't last that long, really.
Yeah.
That's infamous for... I think Oasis rehearsed in the studios there.
Yeah.
Therefore, they played there. Therefore, they never played at the Roadhouse, which is a great shame. But there you go. You can't win them all.
Do you know when we had a quick play around with ChatGPT before, didn't we? We said, write a 2,000-word essay on the Roadhouse. But one thing I noticed then was before the intro went off, it mentioned Elbow. Elbow associated with the Roadhouse. I don't know did they play there a lot? Or?
No, they worked for me.
Did they work for you?
Yeah, they worked for me over a period of about 2 years, 3 years. They were there when they got their first record deal.
Yeah.
One of them started... Who started first? Rick Job, the drummer. No longer the drummer. He got a job behind the bar. This is through Mary Ellen McTague, who is also a very close friend of mine. She's a chef, and she and I opened a restaurant towards the end of the Roadhouse in Prestwich. But she was at the moment cooking for the Roadhouse and studying for her English degree. And through her, lots of Prestwich people got jobs. Juck was the first. I think Pete followed soon afterwards. Craig, and then Guy. So basically Mark Potter, the guitar player, is the only one that didn't work for me during that period. He worked with Scott at... who ended up earning the Temple of Convenience and Big House.
Oh, I used to go in there.
Scott Mackenzie.
Yeah.
But they worked together in a basement Aussie bar somewhere near the Midland Hotel, and I can't remember. I think it was called after a lizard, I think. Oh shit, I'll remember when it's too late.
We can put it in the description.
But anyway,
Yeah.
So all four of them worked for me.
Yeah.
Guy would do the door. The other three were on the bar. 95, 96 to their first deal. So they all left at once, of course, because they were being paid a salary to make music, which is a beautiful, brilliant thing. We were very proud and happy, but it left me disadvantaged in terms of staffing. And then the first deal didn't work out. So they actually came back and said, can we have our jobs back?
Yeah.
And they did get them back.
Yeah.
I was delighted to have them again. So that's why Elbow are always mentioned in the same breath as the Roadhouse. And also, as their career took off and they became bigger and bigger and bigger, they did a couple of shows at the club for various reasons. Oh, I remember when they won the Mercury Music Prize, and we were all watching at home, and it was just the most best thing ever when you see your mates win a prize on telly.
Yeah.
So I texted their manager and said, we've got to throw a party for everyone in Roadhouse. Will you pay for half the free bar if I pay for half? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So it was really, really lovely to be able to throw a congratulations party to them. And then they came back several times to do gigs, special fan club gigs or secret shows when they were far too big, really, for that stage by that time.
Yeah. So they did secret gigs there when they were...
A couple, yeah.
Yeah. You forget, don't you, now with downloads, that when a band had a hit or like sold a lot, they'd sell thousands and thousands of albums, wouldn't they? And bands would get really big, wouldn't they? And now, like, you forget that bands might be one of the last Manchester bands to really get big, mightn't it, Elbow?
I was just going to say that. I think they were at the very tail end of that record company expenditure. And good for them. I'm glad.
Yeah. I remember when they dedicated the award to Brian Clancy's mum, and then I was just thinking of the Roadhouse, and when I was saying before about local Manchester bands, people like Brian Clancy don't get talked about much, do they? And I can imagine he probably played there a few times, didn't he, at the Roadhouse?
Yes, he did. He was a fixture, a regular fixture. Between us and Night and Day, people used to spend daylight hours in Night and Day because it was open for a start. We were never trading during the day. And then they used to kind of drift over to us at night time. And then we'd probably all go back to Night and Day at the end of the shift to carry on drinking. But yeah, it was a real... Staff at the Roadhouse were constantly shagging staff at Night and Day and vice versa. It was a very, what do you call it? Not mixed gene pool, but we fed... No, gone. My perimenopausal brain can't think of the words.
He'll come back.
Yeah.
Do you know when we were talking on the phone, you said Interpol played there, didn't you?
I did, but don't ask me about that because I've got absolutely no recollection. I think I might have a poster upstairs. Towards the end, I mean, it was very disorganised. We had to leave the building under duress, really. Kind of grabbed what I could. So I got a pile of little posters that we kept. Some have been signed by the acts, some haven't.
Yeah.
As memorabilia. I think I've probably still got an Interpol poster, but that's about as much as I can recall. Radio 6, interestingly enough, did Lauren Laverne did a playlist yesterday about that period in New York. So Interpol got a play on her show, and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and all the bands we were talking about that feature in that book that I've already with Meet Me in the Bathroom.
Yeah. That
we talked about. And the reason why that came to mind after I started watching your videos is the parallels between this project and that project. The fact that the people in your films reference one another is very much like the people that were interviewed to describe that scene in New York in the book.
Yeah.
And also it really resonated because last year, believe it or not, I started to reach out to people that I met through the Roadhouse, asking them about their favourite track or band from the period, how they were associated with the club.
Yeah.
Like just a tiny little questionnaire. So I could start collecting stories because you come to understand. I'm not, unfortunately, I'm a really shit archivist. I didn't keep anything. I didn't record anything. I wish I'd bought a T-shirt from every single band that had passed through there. I wish I'd had my picture taken with my arm around the lead singer. Yeah, it just didn't at the time. It did not occur to me. Yeah. That was not what it was about. In many respects, the bands were like the backdrop, almost, which actually don't keep that. That sounds really disrespectful. But yeah, so I wish at the time I'd thought a bit harder about collecting things that would, they were all selling their first album that time. Had I collected those first albums, I'd have a wicked record collection.
Yeah.
Probably CD collection, rather. That would probably have enough value to sustain me into old age.
Yeah.
But it's too late for that sort of thinking, isn't it? So instead of having a load of mementos left, I have got hundreds of friends on Facebook still, most of whom I met at the Roadhouse. And these aren't just... There's a couple of band members in there, but the majority of them are just regular gig goers that we got on really well with and probably ended up smoking and drinking after hours.
Yeah.
So I started to reach out to them to remind me of those times, because like everybody else you've interviewed in this project, my memory's really, really hazy.
I think everyone's is, and there's probably a good reason for that, I think, for a lot of us. And I think the exciting thing is that as I go along, then people have got, it's hazy, I can't remember things, but everyone remembers something.
Yes.
So as we go along...
Yes. Filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
Well, a Radio 6 DJ, whose name I can't recall, did a podcast piecing together her memories of when she used to DJ around the circuit because of a lack of sleep and a condition. Wasn't Mary Ann Hobbs? Oh God, who was it? Nick Grimshaw, and dark curly hair, red lips, really pretty. I can see her face. It's her Anne. No.
Annie Nightingale.
No, she's balls. She did a podcast primarily to talk to the people that she'd worked with during that point in her career, because she had no real memories of it due to lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was brilliant. And that was one of the reasons I started to reach out to friends of mine to tell me about their time at the club.
Yeah.
But I was doing it in longhand, in written format, whereas you're recording these things. But they're spread out all over the world. Ex-Roadhouse regulars they're an international bunch now.
Well, it was an important venue. Do you know, I was thinking that, we had a quick chat before, didn't we? And I was saying I didn't enjoy my 30s because it was the end of my 20s and didn't have as many friends to go out with. And so at some point in my late 20s, I'd probably taken too many E's and I was just partied out. And I think the last club night that I remember was the Electric Chair. That was like the last... Because when you mentioned PJ Bells before, because I worked in town and I spent about 10 to 12 years, the locals were in town, and then there was always the next big thing. So like acid jazz was really big for a while, and I remember PJ Bells being really big, and then lots of other things going on. And I remember everyone talking about the Electric Chair, and I went a few times. So when was Electric Chair? Was that like the late 90s?
No, it was started in the early 90s. I mean, it ran for
Was
years
it started in the early 90s?
Yeah, it started at the...
Well, my memory rubbish, isn't
94
it?
or 95 at the Roadhouse. And it came about partially because Luke and I were friends, and we both lived in the same block of flats above
Luke Unibomber.
what became Coldplay. We were all living there. There was Mick Yan, who owned Night and Day, lived there. Luke Unibomber lived there. I lived there. Steve Murray, who was one of the directors of the Roadhouse in its earlier incarnation, and a sound engineer, lived there. Ange Kirk, who's a stylist, she lived there. There was only 6 of us in that block. And Luke had been wanting to do something for a while, and we started at the club. I remember going out flyering for him. And I remember we cut up bits of circuitry to put in little baggies to play on the word electric. But yeah, that night started, and it took a while to take off. And John Macbeath, the owner at the time, did not understand the concept of a night that didn't have live music in it. The DJ thing hadn't reached him yet. But I had come from a clubbing background. I consider myself still as a raver. And me and my Essex girlfriends, because I was living in Clacton-on-Sea for my formative years, we discovered all sorts of wonderful clubs and raves down south. We also discovered Ibiza. I went there for a couple of summers. And so by the time I came to Manchester in 91, yeah, the Hacienda was a great club. But when you've been to Amnesia and Space and Heaven and loads of other places, the Hacienda didn't really... It wasn't my formative clubbing experience. It was one of them for sure.
Yeah.
And it was great. And I loved Flesh. Loved Flesh. So I came from that's a very long-winded way of saying I came from a clubbing background. That's what I understood. Dance floors and drugs.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mum. So when Lou wanted to do something DJ based, and that was like almost like the baton had been handed over because it was very dressy, it was very Deansgate at that time. And that wasn't what I understood dancing culture to be about, nor he.
Yeah.
Oh, nor Justin, obviously the other Unabomber. And together they started something that took a while. And all this time, over these nights, these monthly Saturday nights, John Macbeath would be saying, "I told you so, I told you so, where is everyone, where are all these drinkers?" And then suddenly it exploded. And I can't remember if that was due to a guest they'd invited in. I'm pretty sure in the early days they invited Badly Drawn Boy to DJ in the loading bay. We used to illegally use the loading bay behind the club, which was a communal fire escape area. But we'd just shove some decks up the stairs, and that would become another room for an extra bunch of people to dance in. So yeah, I think it probably took about 9 months to find itself. But when it found itself, there were queues around the block. It was only one a month as well, so it wasn't a...
Oh, was the only one a month?
Yeah.
So it was an event, wasn't it?
It was an event, and it was stupidly packed, to the extent that by the time I took over the business with another chap, Steve Lloyd, when John Macbeath came to the end of his patience with being a publican stroke club owner, he was about to go bankrupt, and he tipped us all off, bless him. And I thought about it for a bit. I'd been working there full time for quite a few years. I knew by that time that it was a viable business that was making money. It was paying off the bills, and there was some left over. What more do you want? So I asked him if he would, instead of bankrupting it. Well, no, actually, he did still bankrupt it, but he eased, he greased, he oiled things so that we could step into the lease, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone can start a limited company. That was really easy.
Yeah.
But I think he enabled us to take on where they carried off. It wasn't strictly legal, but I'm really glad we did it.
Yeah.
We also had to pay him a certain amount of money that was undeclared.
Yeah.
For the...
Can we leave that in?
Sure. What are they going to do to me now? Yeah. So I've completely lost the thread of my...
We were talking about the...
electric chair.
Yeah.
And then when that went to Music Box, because it got to a point where, however many guests we were having in our club, it was a lot more than the legitimate capacity. They knew they could do bigger and better, so they took it to Music Box.
Where was Music Box?
Music Box was another basement venue that was it beneath Gilly's Rock World on Oxford Road?
Yes.
Or was it
Oxford,
adjacent to?
Yeah.
But it was twice, if not 3 times, the size of the Roadhouse, and it continued there for goodness knows how long. And then in its place came a whole host of other brilliant dance nights where we had a rotating Saturday with, Robo Disco, Spellbound, Drum and Bass Night. God, I love those nights. Tropical Hot Dog Payday was in the early days, didn't last long. Jane Compton had Stepper's Delight, essentially a female-fronted, female-run, female DJ'd night. Just like John and his blues band, she ran out of female artists, rather sadly, too soon. Yeah. And then Friends and Family came. Now, they'd been running events at Planet K. So kind of electric chair expanded and left. Friends and family had been doing big nights at Planet K, which was 900 capacity on... It's been Mint Lounge for a long time on Oldham Street.
Yeah.
But they'd been running monthly events, and once they found out that Electric Chair were going... No, maybe not that. Maybe they came to us, but they brought their night weekly.
Yeah.
Which is gold. That's what you want. You
Yeah.
want a successful, popular club night where people are going to wash their pills down with cans of Red Stripe.
Yeah.
Dance until 4 o'clock. And that was the jackpot. It was brilliant. Beautiful music. Brilliant.
What was the music? Electric Chair. I can't remember now. It wasn't house music, was it? Or was it?
There was an element of house music, yeah. And they put me on the spot now because I don't know how to describe it. It was
Dance music.
It was dance music.
Yeah.
So I was hearing tunes from my Balearic days, but they were also bringing new stuff and world stuff and guitar stuff and disco. Yeah. It was a real mixture. Music that kept people dancing.
It was really exciting listening to you now, like the 90s. I don't think there's been an era like it where the way dance music merged with indie, and then there was new things coming out all the time, wasn't there? So there was like, there was a period where acid jazz was big. I know that wasn't necessarily a new thing, but there was drum and bass, there was jungle, there was trip hop, there was all merged into one, wasn't there? And even like the indie bands like Primal Scream, they were like, it was dance music, wasn't it?
When Andy Weatherall got to them, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, it was an explosion, wasn't it, around that time? And it all came from the beats, I think, that we inherited from Detroit.
Yeah. It's why like you can feel like, it's why you can be hesitant where you think, what type of music did they play? But it was like, it is hard to put your finger on it because it was just, everything was merging together. And it wasn't, like in other videos, you say like you go somewhere like the Bills and then an indie record had come on and then Joy Division had come on and people go to the dance floor and then electronic music might come on, so then people would leave the dance floor and other people's had come on. And then Tintin said it like I think he said the migrating dance floor, but it was just all one, wasn't it? It was just all, it wasn't just, you weren't just an indie kid where you were anything like Electric Chair. That was one of the first where I thought this is just everything.
Yeah, it was. It really, really was.
Is that where Luke started out? Or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, because I should know more about Luke. But I always thought that, like, Rough, I go to I know Rough Dog from the gym, and he knows Luke quite well, and he said there's a famous picture of Luke in the Hacienda where he's off his head. And I was trying to think, when did Luke get big? And I was always thought, was it the Electric Chair or was he? It'll probably pop up in the comments, won't it? Now, so no, I was big at this night.
I think the Electric Chair was the beginning for him. That was his solid base. I mean, he's huge now. Do you watch his Instagram?
Yeah. Yeah, he's funny though, isn't he, as well?
Yeah.
He's got a good
personality.
He's watchable. So I always lose track of the time, and I always aim for around half an hour to 40 minutes. And where do you think we are now? We've probably done half an hour, haven't we?
Yeah, it feels like it. I don't know, my watch is...
So I always try to end them with like, just think of if you can, think of a track that takes you back to the Roadhouse.
Oh, that's so easy. Straight away I knew. It is Roots Maneuver Witness.
Oh, wow, I'm going to have to listen to that.
Because he played it. It was one of those tours, again, that they were like unicorn shit. It happened so infrequently, and every small venue needs them, where an artist is booked months before, and then they break in between the original booking. So they've chartered, or they've got shitloads of radio airplay, which means that instead of selling the usual 50 or 60 tickets that most even Muse and Coldplay did at that level, the first few gigs, the Roots Manoeuvre was sold out because Witness was everywhere.
Yeah.
And our sound system, which I was trying to remember earlier, I think our bass bins might have come from the Hacienda. I don't even know who I'd ask about that, because rather sadly my business partner, the guy who was the technical director of the club, so he was in charge of all of the PA and whatnot, he died before we closed. So, and he's, I think, the only person that could tell me where those bass bins came from.
Yeah.
But the point of me mentioning them is that they were, the sound system I always felt lent itself better for breaks and beats than maybe it did for guitar bands. I don't know, someone's going to come at me for that. But feeling that song, it's a very bass-heavy song.
Yeah.
Go through your body. And I was stood side of stage just looking at the sea of people pogoing. That'll never leave me, and I wish I had more of those memories of gigs at the club, but they do all tend to blur into one. But Roots Manoeuvre, playing Witness to a packed house with sweat coming down the ceiling. I think it was before we'd afforded to put air conditioning in as well, so it was really uncomfortable for everyone. But no one gave a shit, because it was magic.